If you've ever looked at a hothouse in the afternoon and thought, there has to be a cheaper way to fight this, you're not wrong. I can show you a way to keep a house noticeably cooler without running air conditioning, and for most homes, it can cost under $10 to set up. It does not make cold air out of thin air. Still, when the weather cooperates, this kind of passive cooling can delay the day's heat buildup enough to make a real difference. The problem is simple. Sunlight pours in through glass, the house absorbs heat all day, and warm outdoor air can keep the place from ever recovering. If you do nothing, the house just keeps storing heat like a cast iron skillet left on the stove. The good news is that you can work with the day-night cycle instead of against it. Flush out the heat at night, trap the cooler air in the morning, block direct sun before it gets in, and stop making extra heat indoors. That is the method. It is not magic, but it is solid. And if you do it right, it can buy you comfort, especially in dry climates or in places where nights cool off well. Let me start with the biggest piece, nighttime ventilation, sometimes called night flushing. That means opening windows after the outdoor temperature drops below the indoor temperature, so the cooler outdoor air can replace the warmer air inside. The best setup is cross ventilation. Open a window downstairs or on the cooler, shaded side of the house, and open another window higher up or on the opposite side so warm air has a place to leave. Warm air rises, so a higher opening helps pull air through the house naturally. This is one of those cases where the house already contains the system. You are not buying a machine, you are using the windows, doors, and temperature difference you already have. If you have a basic household thermometer, even a cheap one, that helps you know when to open and close things. But if you are doing this by feel and by the weather report, that works too. The important timing is this. Open the house when the outside air is actually cooler than the inside air, and close it early in the morning before the day starts pushing heat back in. If you wait until the sun is already beating on the walls and windows, you have missed the best window, no pun intended. In many dry climates, that overnight flush can make a big difference. In hot, humid places, especially where the night stays sticky and warm, it helps much less because the outdoor air may never get cool enough to take heat out of the house effectively. There is also a practical safety side to this. Do not open windows if outdoor smoke, heavy pollution, severe weather, insects, or security concerns make it unsafe. And if you live near a busy road or in an area with poor air quality, you have to weigh that carefully. Natural ventilation is a well-established passive cooling method, but it only helps when the air outside is actually a better choice than the air inside. Now for the second major piece, blocking the strongest sunlight before it enters. If you want to cool a house passively, the sun is the enemy you can actually see. The biggest troublemakers are usually west-facing windows in the late afternoon and south-facing windows that get direct sun for long stretches of the day. Most people already have some kind of blinds or curtains, and those are worth using. Closed blinds and curtains can reduce solar heat gain, but exterior shading is generally more effective because it stops the heat before it gets through the glass. Once the sun is inside, the room starts heating up. If the sun never reaches the glass, you have won a lot of the battle. Here is the under $10 version that actually makes sense. Buy a thrifted white sheet or a cheap light-colored piece of fabric for about $3 to $6. Then use reusable clips, spring clamps, or simple fasteners for another $3 or $4. Hang it outside the hottest window, not directly against the glass if you can help it. Leave an air gap so the shade is outside while the glass stays cooler. That space matters. If the fabric is pressed right against the window, some of the heat still ends up near the glass and gets transferred inward. A white or light-colored cloth works better than a dark one because it reflects more sunlight. You do not need a fancy product for this to be useful. A thrifted sheet clipped to the exterior of a sunny window can reduce the amount of direct sun heating the room, and that is the point. The budget here assumes you already have usable windows and basic interior coverings in the house. If you do not, the cost climbs, and the title becomes less honest. I do want to say something important about reflective films and foil. Do not tape foil or an unapproved reflective film directly onto insulated windows unless the manufacturer says it is allowed. Some window makers warn that applied films can create thermal stress, damage seals, or affect the glass warranty. That is one of those cases where a cheap shortcut can become an expensive mistake. Exterior shade cloth or a loose exterior fabric is a safer temporary approach. Also, if you use outdoor fabric, secure it well enough that the wind cannot turn it into a sail. Keep it away from grills, exhaust vents, porch lights, and other heat sources. The third part of the system is what I call sealing the cool air in during the day. Once the outside temperature rises above the indoor temperature, close the windows. Keep exterior doors closed, except when you are entering or leaving. If a sunny window is adding heat, close the coverings on that side. If another window is already shaded and not causing trouble, you do not have to fuss over it the same way. The idea is to stop the house from soaking up more heat than it needs. This sounds almost too simple, but a lot of people miss the timing. They open the house at night, which is good, but then they leave it open into the morning while the outdoor temperature is already climbing. At that point, the house is inviting the heat back in. You want to catch the cool air, preserve it, and then keep the house as closed up as practical until outdoor conditions improve again. Now let's talk about the fourth piece, because this one matters more than people think. Reduce the heat you make inside the house. The CDC specifically recommends reducing stove and oven use when you are trying to keep a home cooler without air conditioning. That lines up with common sense. The oven heats the kitchen. The clothes dryer dumps heat into the house. The dishwasher drying cycle adds heat too. Even long stovetop cooking can push the indoor temperature up when you least want it. So if you can, cook earlier in the day, cook outside safely, use smaller appliances, or lean on cold meals when it makes sense. Run laundry and dishwashing later in the evening. Not because those chores are bad, but because timing them better helps the house avoid unnecessary heat during the hottest hours. This is where the biggest savings often come from, not in direct cash, but in comfort and reduced need for powered cooling. If you already own the appliances and the clothesline, the direct cost of the cooling routine can be very low. The under $10 setup is mostly for the fabric and clips. After that, the recurring cost is basically nothing unless you replace the cloth eventually or decide to add a thermometer. The real investment is the habit. Let me be honest about performance. This is not a full replacement for air conditioning in a heat wave. It is a heat management routine. It prevents and releases heat. It does not manufacture cold air. In a dry area with cool nights and reasonable airflow, the method can work quite well. In an apartment with windows on only one side, in a poorly shaded upstairs room, in a humid climate, or in a stretch of weather where nights stay hot, it will be much less effective. If outdoor air never gets cooler than the indoor air, opening windows can actually make things worse. That is why I would call this a partial substitute, not a universal replacement. For the right house and the right weather, it can delay the need for air conditioning or reduce how often you need it. For the wrong house or the wrong weather, it is just an extra step that will not carry the load by itself. Sam and Ruth have a farmhouse outside Franklin, Tennessee, and we have seen both sides of this. On some spring and early summer nights, opening the lower windows on the shaded side and cracking a higher window on the opposite side makes the next morning feel completely different. On muggy nights, though, the house never really gets that clean cool down, and the whole routine has less payoff. That is why I do not talk about this as a miracle. It is climate dependent. A useful method in one place can be a weak method in another. If you want the strongest combination, it is this. Flush stored heat outside overnight. Trap the cooler air in the morning. Stop direct sun from reheating the rooms, and avoid generating unnecessary heat indoors. That four-part approach is what makes the system work. Any one piece by itself is weaker. Now, since this video title says less than $10, let's put a realistic number on it. If you thrift a sheet for about $3 to $6 and buy clips or fasteners for $3 to $4, you are around $6 to $10 total. If you already have sheets, old curtains, or suitable fabric, and if your house already has enough window placement for cross ventilation, your extra cost may be zero. If you need more than one shaded window, the total may go up a little, but you can still keep it modest if you are selective and start with the worst sun exposure first. What about the value? If the routine helps you avoid even a little air conditioning on the hottest days, the payback can be quick. The exact savings depend on your electric rates, the size of the house, how often you would otherwise run the AC, and how hot your climate gets. A realistic household that uses this method to reduce a few hours of AC use on some summer days might save enough to recover a $10 setup in the first month or two of hot weather. In a place where the method only takes the edge off, the savings may be smaller and come more from comfort than from a dramatic utility bill drop. I do not want to overstate that. If you already have very efficient cooling, or if your house stays hot no matter what because of insulation problems, roof exposure, or poor ventilation, this will not produce huge savings. But if you are trying to stretch a limited budget and your climate is compatible, the economics are hard to argue with. A few dollars for cloth and clips is a lot easier to justify than a bigger electric bill all summer. There are also a few common mistakes that can make the method fail. One is opening windows too late in the morning. Another is using dark fabric or putting the shade on the inside instead of the outside when the goal is to block solar heat before it enters. Another is forgetting that some rooms, especially top floor rooms, may need more help because hot air collects there. And one more mistake is trying to force the method in a place where outdoor air is unsafe or simply too warm and humid to help. If you are a renter, this method is especially attractive because it usually does not require permanent changes. A reusable clip system and a removable cloth shade are much easier to manage than drilling or installing anything fixed. Still, check your lease before you hang anything outside a window or balcony, and be considerate about building rules. You do not want to create a nuisance or violate an agreement just to save a few dollars. For homeowners, the same advice applies, but you have a little more flexibility. If you already have exterior shutters, awnings, trees, or deep porch overhangs, use them. Those are excellent forms of passive shade. In fact, the cheapest cooling measure is often the one your house already has and you are not fully using. One more thing about older adults and hot weather. During dangerous heat, use air conditioning or go to an air-conditioned cooling location rather than depending entirely on passive cooling. I mean that plainly. Older adults are more vulnerable to heat illness, and a method that works fine on an ordinary warm day may not be enough in an extreme event. This routine is meant to reduce cooling costs when conditions allow, not to ask anyone to tough out unsafe temperatures. So here is my honest verdict. If your home gets cooler at night, if you can open windows safely, and if your worst sun exposure comes from a few predictable windows, this method can be a smart, low-cost way to keep the house noticeably more comfortable. A realistic setup can cost $6 to $10, sometimes less if you already have the materials. The main recurring cost is your time and the discipline to open and close the house at the right moments. The biggest limitation is climate. Humid nights, hot nights, poor airflow, upstairs rooms, and apartments with limited window options reduce the payoff fast. If I were helping a neighbor start this tomorrow, I would tell them to do one simple thing first. Choose the single hottest window in the house, buy or find a light-colored sheet, and set up temporary exterior shade there this evening. Then tonight, open the house when the outdoor temperature drops below the indoor temperature and close it again early in the morning. Watch how the room behaves for a few days. That will tell you quickly whether this is a useful tool in your home or only a partial help. If you want, leave me a comment and tell me what kind of house you live in and whether your nights actually cool off where you are. That makes a big difference with this method, and I'm curious how it works in different places.